Imagine, it was a dark, quiet night, the kind of night when the full moon lights up the trail and makes the shadows of the trees dance around you. I was following an unknown path, eager to explore what nature had to offer. I walked for hours until I found a perfect spot to camp. Everything was set up, the fire was lit, the sleeping bag was spread out, and the sound of crickets formed the soundtrack of the night. Everything was going well until, in the distance, I saw someone walking. What unsettled me was the fact that this person wasn't carrying a flashlight. Who walks through the woods without a flashlight at night? I watched, trying to discern what was going on. The figure walked past and disappeared into the darkness. Later, as I was about to fall asleep, I heard footsteps. I opened my tent and, to my horror, saw the same person standing just a few feet away from me, watching my campsite. My heart raced. I didn't wait to figure out their intentions. I grabbed my stuff as fast as I could and got out of there, feeling fear tightening my chest with every step. That night, I learned that nature is not the only danger one can encounter while camping. I headed down the trail as quickly as possible, illuminated only by the flickering light of my flashlight. Every sound in the woods seemed amplified by my fear. After a while, I found an abandoned cabin. It looked like a good place to hide and catch my breath. I quickly went inside and closed the door behind me. Inside the cabin, everything was covered in dust and cobwebs. There was an old fireplace and some broken chairs. I decided to stay there until dawn. It was then that I saw, on one of the walls, several old photographs. They showed different people, all with scared expressions on their faces. I got goosebumps when I realized that the photos seemed to have been taken while people were sleeping. The night passed slowly, each second seeming like an eternity. I couldn't sleep, my ears straining to hear every sound. Around midnight, I heard footsteps again, this time coming from outside the cabin. I held my breath and turned off the flashlight. The footsteps came closer and stopped right at the door. Fear took over me completely. Who or what was out there? The footsteps moved away, and for a moment I thought I was safe. But then, the door handle began to slowly turn. My mind was in a panic. I grabbed a piece of firewood from the fireplace, ready to defend myself. The door creaked open, revealing the same figure I had seen before. This time I could see his face, pale, sunken eyes and an eerie smile. He didn't say a word, he just stood there, staring at me. Suddenly, he took a step towards the cabin. I reacted instinctively, attacking him with a piece of wood. He screamed and fell backwards, disappearing into the darkness of the night. Without a second thought, I ran out of the cabin and followed the trail until I finally found a road. There I received help from a passing driver and returned to civilization, vowing never to camp alone again. When I got home, I tried to go on with my normal life, but the memory of that night wouldn't leave me alone. Every night I had nightmares about the pale figure and his sunken eyes. I decided to investigate further about the area where I had camped. I discovered that, many years ago, there was a town in that region. The cabin I found was the last remaining structure from a tragedy that had occurred there. The town was destroyed by a mysterious fire, and many of its residents were never found. One day, while I was at the supermarket, I noticed an old man who looked familiar. As I approached, he told me that he knew the history of the town and that the figure I had seen was the spirit of a man wrongly accused of having started the fire. He was cursed to roam the woods, seeking revenge on anyone who ventured onto his land. The photos in the cabin were of other people who had met the same terrifying fate that I almost met. This revelation shook me even more. I began to have visions of the figure in random places. In my bedroom window, in the bathroom mirror, and even in crowds. I decided to seek spiritual help. A local medium advised me to perform a peace ritual for the spirit. He gave me detailed instructions and a list of items I would need to perform the ritual at the cabin. Very scared, I returned to the forest. Upon reaching the cabin, I followed the medium's instructions, lighting candles and reciting the words he taught me. The figure appeared again, But this time his expression was different. He seemed sad, almost relieved. After completing the ritual, the figure disappeared in a soft glow, and I felt a deep peace I had never felt before. Since that night, I have never been tormented by visions or nightmares again. Experience has taught me that some mysteries of nature go beyond what we can understand, and that respect and compassion can bring peace to even the most troubled spirits. I hope you liked the story, because the second story is even more chilling. Just don't forget to see if you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories. Imagine you're hiking the amazing trails of Cascades National Park. The air is fresh and clean, and the sounds of nature around you create a perfect soundtrack for your adventure. Birdsong, rustling leaves, and the gentle murmur of streams combine to form a natural melody. Every step on the trail is a new discovery. A rare flower here, a crystal clear stream there, a curious squirrel peeking out from a tree. It's like being in a movie, completely connected to nature. As the sun begins to set, the sky transforms into a canvas of vibrant colors. Orange, pink, and purple. The golden light of dusk causes the shadows of the trees to lengthen, creating a magical atmosphere. You decide it's time to look for a place to camp and rest. Along the way you come across a small camp already set up. A man, probably a hiker like you, is sitting around a campfire. He seems friendly and full of energy. "Hey, do you want to join me?" he asks with a smile. "I have marshmallows." You accept the invitation, and soon you are sharing stories and laughter. He introduces himself as Jack and talks about his ambitious plans to reach the top of the trail the next morning. The conversation flows easily and a sense of camaraderie is felt. Jack is a born storyteller, and you laugh about his adventures and misadventures on other trails. As night approaches, you retreat to your tents, eager for the next day's adventure. Waking to the first rays of sunlight, you set your tent up for another day of hiking. But something is different. The campsite next door is completely empty. The spot where Jack was is deserted, but his gear is still there. There is no sign of him. A chill runs down your spine. You call out to him, but the only response is the silence of the forest. Something is wrong. Trying to shake off the dark thoughts, you decide to continue your journey. The trail is quieter than usual, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. However, as you follow the trail, you notice a faint beacon flickering between the trees. A feeling of unease grows inside you. It feels like there is something or someone watching you. Fear begins to take hold of you, and you decide not to risk it. With your heart racing, you hastily head back the way you came. Every noise in the woods seems amplified, and the feeling of being watched only increases. You nearly trip over an exposed root, but the adrenaline keeps you on your feet. Each step is faster than the last, and the familiar scenery of the trail offers no comfort. You finally reach the park entrance. Out of breath, you report Jack missing, still trying to figure out what happened. The park ranger, a stern-faced, experienced man, promises to investigate, but you can't shake that creepy feeling. Days later, you get a call from the park. They say they investigated the place but found no sign of Jack. Your gear was exactly where you said he was, but there were no footprints or signs of where he might have gone. Jack's story begins to become legend among hikers in Cascades National Park. Some say he simply got lost. Others believe he was taken by something that lives deep in the forest. You, however, can't forget those invisible eyes that seem to be watching you. Months pass and Jack's story spreads. Some hikers report feeling the same sensation of being watched, and occasionally there are reported sightings of a faint beacon shining through the trees at dusk. The stories vary. Some say it's Jack's spirit trying to find its way back. Others believe it's something more sinister, an entity that feeds on the fear of the lost. You begin to investigate more about the area. Curious and restless, you discover that over the years, other mysterious disappearances have occurred in the same region. Local legends tell of a forest guardian spirit, an ancient being that protects the heart of Cascades National Park. According to legends, those who enter their territory without respect or disturb the peace of the forest are taken away, never to be seen again. Fascination and fear begin to consume you. You feel a growing need to return to the park, to understand what really happened. With a group of friends, you decide to organize a new expedition. They are skeptical, but their determination is contagious. Returning to the park, you follow the same trail. The landscape is both familiar and eerie. Memories of the last trip are fresh in your mind, but you try to remain calm. Your friends try to keep the mood light with jokes and conversation, but the tension is palpable. As night falls, you set up camp near the spot where Jack disappeared. The fire crackles and glows, casting dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. The horror stories begin, and the surrounding forest seems to hear every word. Suddenly, one of your friends falls silent. His eyes are fixed on something beyond the campfire. They all turn and see the same faint beacon flickering between the trees. Silence falls over the group and fear is almost tangible. You slowly stand up, feeling your heart hammering in your chest. "Let's investigate," you suggest, trying to keep your voice steady. Flashlights in hand, you make your way toward the lighthouse. The walk is tense, every noise amplified by the silence of the night. The lighthouse seems to move away, always one step ahead. The feeling of being watched returns, stronger than ever. You finally reach a clearing and the lighthouse goes out. In the center of the clearing, you find an old journal, partially buried in the ground. You pick it up and when you open it, you realize it's Jack's journal. The last entries are confusing and terrifying. He wrote about feeling watched, about a lighthouse that seemed to guide him, and about a presence he couldn't see but knew was there. The last entry breaks off mid-sentence. You decide to head back to camp, even more disturbed. The night is long and restless, and each of you takes turns keeping watch. In the morning, as you dismantle camp, you notice something etched into a nearby tree. It scrawled words, "Don't follow the lighthouse." Back in town, you hand Jack's journal over to the authorities, but questions remain. What really happened to Jack? What is the mysterious lighthouse? And, more importantly, what lives deep within Cascades National Park? Jack's story becomes a warning to hikers. Some decide to avoid the area. Others are driven by curiosity and a desire to solve the mystery. You, however, know that some things in nature are best left unanswered. The forest holds its secrets, and perhaps it's just as well that way. I hope you liked the story, because the third story is even more chilling. Just don't forget to see if you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories. I hope you liked the story. It was a full moon night, illuminating the path with its silver light and creating intricate shadow patterns between the tree branches. The forest seemed like a world apart, where every sound was amplified by the stillness of the night. I, a nature enthusiast, was eager to explore a trail I had never walked before. The fresh forest air enveloped me, mingling with the soft smell of pine trees and damp moss. I found a perfect spot to camp, a small, cozy clearing, where the soft ground of dry leaves would serve as my bed. I quickly set up my tent and lit a fire, the flames dancing and casting dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. The crackling of burning wood was the only thing breaking the silence of the night, along with the constant symphony of crickets and the occasional whisper of an owl overhead. As I prepared for a quiet night under the stars, my eye caught movement in the distance on the trail I had walked hours earlier. A lone figure emerged from the shadows, striding unhesitatingly down the trail. What unsettled me was not just the absence of a flashlight to light the way, but the determined way the person moved, as if he knew every inch of that terrain without needing light. Curious and a little worried, I watched as the figure disappeared into the darkness, making its way beyond my vision. I tried to shake off my dark thoughts, convincing myself that he was just another nighttime adventurer like me, perhaps a local who knew these trails well. Yet something about the way he moved, making no sound other than footsteps in the foliage, left me uneasy. As the night wore on and the campfire dwindled, I huddled in my sleeping bag, trying to ignore the feeling that I was not entirely alone in this isolated clearing. That was when I heard the footsteps again. This time, They weren't distant and vague, but distinct and close, as if someone was deliberately approaching my camp. With my heart pounding in my chest, I held my breath and zipped up the tent opening, preparing for what I might find outside. My flashlight illuminated the scene, revealing the figure standing at the edge of the clearing, its outlines obscured by the darkness. A chill ran down my spine as I realized he wasn't simply passing through. The seconds stretched out like hours as I stared at him, trying to make out his features in the dim light. He stood still as if studying me, his invisible eyes fixed on my camp as if contemplating prey. The stillness of the night grew oppressive, the crackling of the fire feeling like an audible betrayal of my location. Without waiting to discover his intentions, my fear turned into action. With shaking hands, I hurriedly packed my things, making as little noise as possible, as I felt his invisible eyes still upon me. Every sound was a warning, every shadow a potential threat that night where the unknown had become a palpable nightmare. Finally, with my backpack on my back and breathing heavily, I left the temporary safety of my camp behind and entered the trail that now seemed darker and more sinister than before. Each step echoed in my mind, accompanied by the silent echo of my own fears. As I walked through the forest toward civilization, every shadow, every movement in the vegetation, seemed to me a disturbing reminder of the previous night. That night I learned a profound lesson about the loneliness of the forest and the dangers that lurk in the shadows, where darkness reveals not only wild beauty but also the disturbing mysteries that can turn an adventure into a horror story. Tell me which story made your hair stand on end? Tell me which one you liked the most? Because in the next video the story is even more chilling. Just don't forget to see if you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories.